If they can't make progress because they cannot genuinely acknowledge their abuse, then I'm sorry. I know it's harmful for children not to know both of their parents, but it's more harmful for them to be continually manipulated by an abusive personality. Hello and welcome to this second episode for the Survivor Diaries. This episode is my message to the family justice system, and I strongly recommend that you, in addition to watching this video, you also watch the other video. This is a two-part series, which is my message to the court user. I'm in this unusual position of being a court professional, part of the family justice system, and I am also a current court user and part of the family court system in that respect as well. And I have been for some 20 years involved in the criminal side and the family law side of domestic abuse, and retrained, and now I'm a family lawyer dealing in private children law proceedings, England and Wales, and usually where there is domestic abuse as a feature. So my message to the family justice system, I'm going to be very clear about the objectives of this video. What I want to get across in this is the view of the court users coming in to the family justice system. I want to help in this video the family justice system to understand how I see that things are going wrong, and I also want in this video to show how the court system there's examples of good practice. I've seen the family justice system working brilliantly, protecting mothers, protecting children in such a way that the father has to address their behaviour before they can have a relationship with the child. And I'm speaking to the family justice system. The balance of harm test, of course, is harmful if a child cannot have a relationship with one of their parents. However, if it's domestic abuse, it's more harmful for them to have a relationship with a parent who is manipulating them psychologically, emotionally, so that they can control and hurt the object of their abuse, which is, of course, the children's mother. And that's harmful to the mother and harmful to the children. So we'll begin with the view of the court user. And I'll just briefly explain where my view of the court user is coming from. Obviously, I've mentioned that I'm a court user myself. Because I've started the Survivor Diaries channel and through social media, this has meant that I'm having a massive number of conversations with court users, and they are mothers in the court system, and they're experiencing child arrangements proceedings, some private, some wandering into public law, and there's a lot of confusion. I'm also, as well as being on social media, on the Survivor Diaries channel and receiving information here, I've been on the Freedom programme a couple of times. I've been to a few conferences in domestic abuse, and they're usually from survivors, so I'm speaking again to court users. And what the opinions really of the family justice systems right now are not very good. There are words being used like corrupt, liars, Kafkas lied, Children's Services lied, the courts being biased in favour of the abuser, and the courts failing to protect. And if you think about it, the family justice system must be failing to protect in domestic abuse cases, because you know as well as I do that these cases keep coming back to court, because somehow, even though the court deals with the domestic abuse element, or thinks it does, then the domestic abuse carries on through the child arrangements once the spotlight of the court is off, and the father, I'm being very gender specific because I'm talking about the co-parenting relationship and I'm following Pat Craven's model of the dominator, the father can then begin the manipulation, and the sole aim is to degrade, destroy, demean the other parent through the children, and that is incredibly harmful to the children and to the other parent. I know I'm not going to pull any punches in what I'm saying here. I think that there are some reasons why this is not going right, and why the family justice system is receiving such flack at the moment. There's talk of reform. I personally don't believe that it needs reform. I believe that some things need review, and I'll come back to that towards the end of this episode. So what's going wrong? I want to help the family justice system to understand what's going wrong. And like all of my YouTube videos on the Survivor Diaries channel, I do this by trying to share and show examples of good practice as much as possible. So one of the things that I've had a recent debate on Twitter about is whether or not there's this presumption in law about contact. And 2014, Children and Families Act, Section 11, inserted into the Children Act of 1989 at Section 1 a new subsection which is 2 capital A. So if you're looking for this, look for Children Act 1989, Section 1, brackets 2 capital A, close brackets. And what you'll see there is the presumption. And it will say that really, unless it's deemed unsafe for the welfare of the child, there is a presumption that some form of contact between the parents is beneficial for the child and it will further the child's welfare. Practice Direction 12J has made some amendments which include how the courts can disapply that principle at Section 1(2)(a) of the Children Act. However, this is just my humble opinion about what might be going wrong. So 2014, the changes came into the Children Act legislation. And I imagine that CAFCAS, the judiciary, all receiving training. So they had this training about this presumption and about how both parents really, even if there's been domestic abuse in the past, surely they can get on and be some kind of safe parenting going on regardless. And I think a lot of CAFCAS officers, I refer frequently, and I'm not afraid to say this, CAFCAS is a wild card, 50-50. Some CAFCAS officers, totally all over the practice direction in its revised form, will see that there's allegations of domestic abuse, it's harming the children, and that the court's going to need to make findings before it can decide that even the interim contact is safe. And that's perfect, that's exactly what CAFCAS should do. And then there's other CAFCAS officers who seem to just not see the practice direction at all and just see that somehow this perfect co-parenting thing needs to be just hammered into both of these parents. What on earth is going wrong with these parents? And then the high conflict parenting accusations come across, and that's because the high conflict is that the mother's saying he's very abusive and the father's saying no, I'm not. So I guess, yeah, they're in conflict to a certain extent, but a high conflict relationship where both parents are both having a go at each other, both parents are potentially going to damage the children by doing that, that's not the same as a domestic abuse case. And how do you tell the difference? Well, in my humble opinion, you've got to err on the side of caution. If domestic abuse has been alleged, then the court needs to look at that. And the fact-finding process that can occur if Practice Direction 12J is being followed correctly is so intricate and careful that if it is a false allegation of domestic abuse, it'll be found. If it is a true allegation of domestic abuse, it'll be found. I've got absolute faith in this process. And so, don't take the risk. Don't dismiss allegations of domestic abuse as historic. Because first of all, are we talking about historic allegations? Has there been recent harm since a previous order? Even if the domestic abuse was many years ago and there's been no contact, you can't dismiss that as, oh well, they'll be fine now, they'll be changed. The only reason they're probably getting in touch after such a long absence is because they want to continue the harassment of the mother, who in their mind has run off with their property, which is their children. So I think some CAFCAS officers, some courts, some judges are still with the presumption being introduced in 2014, thinking that that is what has to happen. However, something's happened since then. The addition of Section 1, subsection 2A of the Children Act means that the courts have an ideal co-parenting expectation until they see the abuse in the fact-finding hearing. Is that realistic, though? Is it realistic? Because if you've got a perfect co-parenting relationship, Two parents able to put aside their differences after separation, speak civilly and amicably with the other parent, be positive about the other parent be positive about the other parent when they're with the child. We make a daily phone call to mummy to say good night, and vice versa. Flexibility. These cases don't come to court. So it's not practical when you receive an application and domestic abuse is alleged to say, well, why isn't this a perfect co-parenting arrangement? It wouldn't have got to court if it was. So I'm not impressed, personally, with the dismissing of domestic abuse allegations. And I keep coming back to this, why it needs to be taken seriously. But just before I do that, I'm talking to the family justice system, and I'm talking about this problem where the courts, the CAFCAS officers, children's services seem to be looking at this insertion that happened in 2014 and then just running with that. But there's been further changes to the law in response to social pressure to deal correctly with domestic abuse in society. And this prompted a review by Mr. Justice Cobb, which started in 2016 through to 2017. This is the Cobb review, and it led to the amendments to the practice direction 12J, which now in its revised form, which it has been since the end of October 2017, in its revised form it now has much more teeth, right? And I mean this very politely, very respectfully. CAFCAS officers, children's services, magistrates, legal advisors, judges, do you know how it's been amended? Do you know, for example, that the new paragraph 5 now says that if domestic abuse is alleged at any stage of the proceedings, but particularly FUDRA, then the court must decide if they need to engage the practice direction, basically. And paragraph 7 of the revised practice direction 12J, it allows the court to disapply this presumption at section 1(2)(a) of the Children Act that says some kind of involvement from both parents is going to be of benefit, just for the moment, just while they make the findings. Paragraph 25 also says that the court should not order interim contact where domestic abuse is alleged unless it can see that it can make the contact safe, and unless it's made findings about that harm. So in the ideal situation here, if domestic abuse is alleged, then, and especially if there's no contact that's been happening, or it's contact that's broken down at the FUDRA, what I don't want the courts to do is say, oh, no, let's just get the contact restarted. It's stopped for a reason. And if you take it down that route, you'll just get the same case back in court again. And I've got Sir Andrew McFarlane talking about the huge pressure on the family justice system and the number of Children Act applications. A lot of those are repeat applications because the court is not dealing properly with an abusive situation, and they're trying to squeeze them into a positive co-parenting relationship, and that cannot happen unless the abuser has acknowledged, accepted his own behaviour and made progress through a domestic violence perpetrator programme. That contact is still not safe. It will always continue through the child arrangements, and if the court does not properly engage the practice direction, the revised one, then the court is allowing that to happen, and that's why it's getting the criticism that it's getting. What's upsetting me, I think, is that I've seen it working. I've seen it working in my own case. I've seen it working in the cases of mothers that I represent, and the outcome being, after findings have been made of not just physical harm, psychological harm, emotional harm, manipulation of the children, undermining of the mother, allegations of mental health issues keeps coming up to the mother. She's obviously got postnatal depression, she's obviously got anxiety and depression, therefore she's not a fit mother, says the abuser, not the court system. And I'm sorry, if she's coming out of an abusive relationship, she probably has got a few issues. She may well be drinking, taking drugs, doing whatever she can to deal with that. And of course I can't condone any illegal behaviour, and I don't condone any illegal behaviour, but if she is also taking help from her GP and addressing those issues And if those issues have arisen directly because of her having to be in that relationship, then I want the courts to understand and see that. The other thing I have to say about the allegation of domestic abuse, which I say so much in my videos, and why it's not likely to be high conflict parenting if there's a serious allegation of domestic abuse and a mother who's resisting contact. The courts seem to think that mothers make up allegations of domestic abuse. Kafkas think that as well. Some people, not all. And I have to ask you, why would they do that? Because after separation, quite often, even though there may be high conflict, if there's children, then the parents realise that they have to co-parent. They both need each other's cooperation and flexibility, and in a non-abusive situation, the conflict will reduce and they will have some kind of, maybe a bit standoffish, ability to deal with the information and promote the child promote each parent to the child, and a healthy co-parenting relationship can exist. In a domestic abuse situation, what surprises me is how fearful these women are that they're going to get accused of having made the allegations up. And at the same time as talking to me, they are feeding their 5-month-old baby. They've not slept for the last 3 days because they're dealing with a really young baby and they've just had to flee an abusive situation. And can you imagine if it was genuinely a father who was working with the mother, who would look after the child, make sure the child was safe, prioritise the child and not getting at the mother, then obviously the mother would jump at the chance of being able to share the work, the really hard work of co-parenting. And to say that women make up allegations of domestic abuse is nonsense. But even if they did make up allegations of domestic abuse, you go through the fact-finding process, and if they're made up allegations, that's going to become clear. If it's genuine abuse, that's going to become clear. And this is what I've seen working so well. When the practice direction engages, Scott's schedule happens, you've got the statements, you've got the fact-finding, and these can go on for 3 days. And I've seen judges really working through the evidence, really working through to find the right result, to find psychological abuse, emotional abuse, manipulation of the children, and to rightly say that the father needs to address that behaviour and change that behaviour. And this is why I don't believe that the family justice system needs some complete reform, because we'll be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. The brilliant work done in the Cobb review is a mechanism that works, and the family justice system must apply it consistently. They must take allegations of domestic abuse seriously. It's not an allegation that's just made for fun. Women coming out of abusive relationships are already petrified of their abuser. They're trying to appease their abuser. They may have already tried to agree some kind of contact that's going terribly wrong with the abuser, just because they're scared that they'll be told that they're breaking the law and residence will be switched, and they are allowing their children to go to contact when they know that that contact isn't safe. And I don't think that the family justice system needs reminding about things that have been pointed out on the Victoria Derbyshire show, and how many children have died in the last 5 years because contact has been ordered with an abusive parent. The domestic abuse is not going to be made up. Domestic abuse is always going to continue through the child arrangements until it has been addressed by the perpetrator. The courts need to take abuse seriously, and they need to see that it's not just violence. It's far more insidious than it's currently understood to be, and quite often, unfortunately, it's only people that seem to have been in this kind of relationship that can understand the various levels of manipulation, the subtle coercive control that occurs, the gaslighting, it's just horrific. It's very, very difficult to explain, I find, to people who haven't been in it. However, when speaking with other women who have been in it, then it's like we're all talking about the same person. So it's not just violence that they're making allegations of. They'll be making allegations of emotional harm, psychological harm, things that have been said to them. You know, I've had so many cases where fathers have said to the mother, well, kill yourself then, do everybody a favour, right? While the mother is roaring her eyes out because she can't cope with this anymore. The abuser is always going to continue the abuse by manipulation of the children, and this will always harm the children. So what can be done about it? Well, I think that the family justice system, and by that I mean CAFCAS, Children's Services, the courts, so the judiciary, magistrates, legal advisors, I think I've mentioned CAFCAS, all levels need training in the more subtle aspects of domestic abuse. And there happens to be a fantastic training programme already in existence. And I believe that the family justice system needs to be trained about the different types of abuse and how they can continue. And one way to do that would be to use the Freedom Programme training, which is devised by Pat Craven, using her book Living with the Dominator, which you'll know I refer to throughout all of these episodes as the model of the abusive personality. It's something that at work I refer to every single time I speak to a client who has also experienced domestic abuse. In addition to this wider training of CAFCAS, family court professionals, solicitors, barristers, if necessary as well, I don't think I mentioned them, by some kind of Freedom Programme type training. The other training that needs to happen at all levels is about the revisions of the practice direction, 12J. And it's the revisions and how those revisions have now been given some proper teeth by Mr. Justice Cobb, and it really can work. I've seen it working. I love the law because I've seen it work and make protective orders that have protected mothers, protected children, and sometimes meant that a father has to address their behaviour and has to go on a programme and has to make progress. And you know, if they do that, that's brilliant. If they can't make progress because they cannot genuinely acknowledge their abuse, then I'm sorry. I know it's harmful for children not to know both of their parents, but it's more harmful for them to be continually manipulated by an abusive personality. And there are many sources that would confirm that. Luke and Ryan Hart have got some incredible insights into coercive and controlling behaviour that is not violence, and the devastation that that can have on a family. So in summary, in respect of the question now being asked of the family justice system, does it need a review or a reform? I've already mentioned I don't think it needs a reform. I think that's throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I do think that maybe cases post 2017 may need to be reviewed to see if domestic abuse was alleged and the revised practice direction was properly engaged in those cases, if it needed to be. I have gone through some reasons why the practice direction might not need to engage, and I encourage you to see my message to court users, because this is a two-part series of episodes. Excellent practice would be the practice direction being engaged early, or later if needed. So if you've got somebody who's only just become aware of the practice direction and they've already had a DRA, and if you have to raise domestic abuse, then raise it there, and if you have to stop and do fact-finding there, then do that. This allows orders to be made which protect mothers and children from domestic abuse, and that is exactly what the family justice system needs to be doing in society. And I just want to repeat at the end, I do love the law. I love the mechanisms in place to protect mothers and children from domestic abuse, and the flack that the family justice system is receiving is heartbreaking to me. I am making these videos to raise awareness. I'm hoping that I'm not creating offence or sounding overly critical. I'm just simply making observations as a professional in the family justice system who is also speaking to a lot of court users, and I'm also a court user myself. So I hope that's been useful. Please, as I said, do look at this with the message to the court user, and with both videos I'd welcome any comments about the content of either of these videos. There are different ways to contact us. Paul will flash up the Survivor Diaries email, I'm hoping at around about now, and also in the first episode that we've made, and there will be some links to different websites and the practice direction, for example, underneath this episode. So thank you again for watching the double episode. I hope that that has been informative and useful, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode and or vlog. And thank you once again for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Thank you very much, and bye.